Welcome, everyone. If you could take your seats, we're going to get started. Thank you so much for being here today, this afternoon. My name is Beatrice Moget, and I'm Associate Director at Equity for Children. On behalf of Equity for Children, I would like to thank the Tishman Environment and Design Center for sponsoring this event, with a special thank you to the center's director, Michelle DePass, and Associate Director Anna Baptista and their team for helping to make this event possible. I would also like to thank our presenters today, Sherry Barlett, co-editor of the journal Environment and Urbanization, Amanda Cronin from iMatter, Jefferson Diaz and Zakeeyah Harris from the Ironbound Community Corporation, Alex Loznak from Our Children's Trust, and Anze Zadel from the Minujin Solar School Initiative 2014 New Challenge Project. So I just want to mention that we're being live streamed today, so if you want to tweet or use social media, we have hashtags on the table, hanging from the table. And so without further ado, I would like to now hand over the podium to and introduce Mary Watson, our Executive Dean of the Schools of Public Engagement at the New School.
Since I'm being live streamed. Thank you, Beatrice. It's really a thrill to be here today and to sit in this auditorium. We run many, many events at the New School every year, about 1,400 events, but it's not that often that the panelists are as young as some of our panelists today, and so we are thrilled to have you here, and we are excited that you're here, and we can't wait to hear what you're going to say. We spend a lot of time with young people, mostly college-age students, but it's really a rare treat for us to have you today. So don't be nervous. We're super nice. It's going to be awesome. I want to echo Beatrice's thanks to Equity for Children for the work that they've been doing. For those of you who don't know, Equity for Children operates across a number of national borders, including in the U.S., Argentina, Mexico, and Brazil, and it's really oriented to improve the living conditions of poor and marginalized, underserved children around the world. It's part of our graduate program in International Affairs, the Studley Graduate Program in International Affairs, and connected to our Latin American Observatory, and is a key project of the New School in its work on youth and social justice. And also to thank, as Beatrice did, the Tishman Environment and Design Center, which really is a university-wide design center looking at how to bring together issues of design and justice, particularly in the space of environmental justice, and to advance the university's work in those spaces university-wide. So the New School has been involved in issues of social justice and youth activism and climate and fairness and equality since its founding as the New School in 1919, and earlier than that as our Parsons School of Design was founded and Mannes College of Music. For over that 100 or 150 plus years history, depending on how you count it, we've been really taking a close look at the most pressing issues of the day. And in looking at those issues, we've really challenged the status quo. We've asked, what are the alternative viewpoints? We believe in dialogue across disciplines and dialogue across communities. And we're really focused on learning about things in a way that leads to action on pressing social problems. So here we are in 2015, in the week after a very difficult week in Paris, as most of you, I'm sure, are aware, last week, where we've seen some horrific events unfolding, practically on the eve of the climate meeting that's scheduled in 2 weeks from now. And I think that one of the, I'm interested to hear what the panelists have to say about the insights in this moment, but I have a young daughter myself who's 12, and when I came home on Friday evening after we first heard about these horrific events, she asked me what young people will ask, why does this happen? How could this happen? And how do we sort of keep ourselves safe from it? That's her framing. And I think that the question is even deeper, as most of us in this room know, but really it has to do with what are the social and political and economic realities that lead us to these kinds of actions and attitudes about one another, which are in some ways as old as time, but very painful and horrifically difficult to process. For those of you who will be in Paris over the next few weeks or at the climate meeting, know that we appreciate the work that you're doing there as well. So the New School is very active in issues of sustainability and environment, and we've been very aggressive on the issue of climate change. So for example, last April, our undergraduate environmental studies program organized a conference called Sustainapalooza, 2 Degrees Too Much, which was a conversation between students and young alumni who were doing sustainability-related programs. Last February, we got some New York Times press when the New School decided to divest of fossil fuel stocks, and so that was a major action. And we also made a commitment to focus our curriculum and learning around issues of climate change and sustainability. And then last fall, in 2014, we were very active organizing a week of events and activities around Climate Action Week and the People's Climate March that took place here in September of 2014. So we turn to the young people that are in the room today to ask you, what are we going to do and how are we going to get it done? We need you to raise awareness and to give us ideas and insights about how to fight the issues of the effects of climate change. And we're going to hear today from 5 young people who are working hard to do just those things. This afternoon will give us some examples of a way that young people can become climate activists and climate citizens, but it will also advance the conversation about what is the value of young people's voices in this debate at this time. So I turn the microphone over to Alberto Minujin, who's the director of the Equity for Children project. Alberto.
Well, thank you very much, Mary. Thank you very much to all of you. Really, we are as you said, we are very excited. For us, it's a great experience to have young people talking, being with us, telling us what to do. As I said to her, we are not so proud of what we, the adult, do in the world. If we look around, I look around, I said, oh my God, what is going on? No? So we need to do something different. And we have some ideas, but basically, you are the one that are bringing new ideas. Creativity is something that young people, the society tried us not to be creative, no? So the kids learn, and they trying to be different, they trying to do, and the society is trying to say, no, do exactly like in the past. Please, let's not do the same like in the past. Maybe certain things, not everything is terrible, but certain things we need to change, and it's clear. And what you said about what happened last week is very touching, and one of the things that we learned, the idea of that is that there will be a demonstration in Paris, a big, that's the plan. They canceled the demonstration because of the situation, but that should not stop us of doing things. So as Equity for Children, I want to thank all of you for being here. We created Equity for Children like 10 years ago. I was in UNICEF for a period, and I moved to the New School, and we started to say, well, let's do something with children, and what? Inequality is the big thing. Now it's more people talking about that. When we started with that, there were not so many. We think on doing some event, and now we are growing and growing. We are a small group, but a lot of demand. And we decided to focus in 4 areas. One is early child development, the beginning of the life. That is a moment, a very special moment, and care. The other is intra-urban inequalities, and part of what we were talking today is about that. Social justice, intergenerational social justice. Cities, big cities like New York, you know that you have the richest area of the US here, very near here, but the poorest one also very near here, the South Bronx, no? So this kind of inequality is another thing that we are talking. Social protection is the other thing, and climate change. Climate change is something new for us, and we are trying to focus not on the impact. We are looking at the impact, but there's many people looking at the impact. We want to give a space to young people and to know and to learn from what you are doing. So one of the things that we want to do is to promote the voice and the agency of young people. We talk for a long time and we don't know exactly how to do. And today, this is a way of doing that. And the other thing that we are trying to do is to put a light on critical thinking. Let's do the thinking another way. So this is the objective of today. It's not only this event, no, it's not today. Every day, and it's a process to the future. So I really thank another time to you, and I give the podium to Sherry Barlett. Sherry, we worked together in several adventures along the time, something on child poverty and environmental issues, I think. And she's a co-editor of a journal that is Environmental Urbanization and belongs to the CUNY Center of Children's Environmental Research Group. So she will do an introduction, and after we move to the panel. Okay, please, Sharon. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. What happens if I close this computer right now? Oh, I can't do that, can I? I need to put my notes someplace. My very soggy notes. Before I speak, I like to take a walk and think about what I'm going to say, and it was a very wet adventure today. So if I start talking about rain, Equity for Children is really to be congratulated for taking this move into climate change, because climate change is really a most dramatic lens to bring to focusing on issues of inequity, and vice versa. The two of them have such an interesting relationship. I need to acknowledge a bit of a gap right here between the focus of today's event and what I was asked to speak about, which was, in fact, the impacts for children. And there is a gap here because we have these young activists who are working primarily on issues in this country, primarily on issues of mitigation. And I'm focused primarily on the children who are most seriously affected by climate change to date. And this means a focus on the global south, and it means a focus on adaptation rather than mitigation. But I think this does provide a kind of context for what we're all working towards, and creates a way, too, of looking at where the social justice strands are that connect the whole enterprise. Because truly, the impacts of climate change are in many ways a huge and growing expression of global inequity, also a contributor to global inequity. As a very sort of sweeping generality, I think it's fair to say that the people who are most seriously affected by climate change are also the people who have contributed the very least to it. The people who are being walloped most intensely often have extremely low carbon footprints, in some cases even negative footprints, if you think, for instance, of waste pickers living along a canal in Bangladesh or something. These are not the people who have benefited from the things that we have to deal with now. So it's people in poor nations and those in the poorest communities in these nations who bear the brunt of the situation. And this is not because climate change is more severe in these places. It's because people and their enterprises and the places where they live are least able to deal with climate change in the context of poverty. They're most at risk. So that storms that can cause hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of homes to experience power outages in this country might cause equally high numbers of people in some other place to lose their homes or their lives or their livelihoods. If you think of Hurricane Sandy, we don't know for sure that it's an outcome of climate change, but it's a good exemplar. And the impacts were incredible, but 117 people died in the US. And if that same storm had happened in the Philippines or in any number of other places, the impact would have been extremely different. So people in poverty tend to be more at risk to climate-related hazards because of the conditions they live in and their capacity to prepare and to cope with the impacts. Families forced to live in a slum on a floodplain because of the lack of affordable land, and to live in a place where there are no storm drains and no all-weather roads and no sewage system, just it's a matter of fact, they are more at risk. And it's not just a matter of extreme weather events and disasters. Climate change also manifests itself in slow, gradual changes that most of us manage to accommodate to over time. But these can be incredibly challenging in communities and households that are dealing with extreme poverty. Adjusting to the new normal can take resources that cities and communities and households simply don't have. The same thing is true of recovering from extreme events. I mean, look at New Orleans. It's the people in the greatest poverty who are not only hammered the hardest, but who take the longest time to come back from it. This can often be more challenging than the event itself. So anyway, among these global poor, the people who are most at risk are the children, not only from the direct impacts, but from the kinds of adaptations their families and communities are having to make in order to cope with things. So consider just health and survival, first of all. WHO, the World Health Organization, several years ago, estimated that of all climate change-related deaths, 85% were children. Now, this is mostly very young children for a number of reasons. They've got very underdeveloped immune systems. They're just more vulnerable to pathogens and various things. They've got more rapid metabolisms. Their organs are immature. They've got more surface area related to their mass. Also, the impacts are much more likely to have a long-term impact, long-term repercussions. So let's look at one of the things that is most often affected in the context of droughts or flooding or post-disaster situations is water supplies and sanitation. And this is most serious in places that are very poorly provided for. So for instance, in urban slums where there's an absence of piped water and where there's no proper sewerage systems, it can be absolutely impossible to avoid a high level of contamination, especially when events get more extreme. But it doesn't even take a serious flood. Just an intense rainfall can mean that latrines are overflowing, that drains are clogged, that water supplies are contaminated, and this can happen over and over and over again in the course of a year. So diarrheal disease goes way up in these situations, and again, children under 5 get walloped more than anyone else. 80% of all waterborne diarrheal disease affects children under 5. Now, it may not sound too bad, a bout of diarrhea, I mean, what's the big deal? But the fact is, in communities of poverty in much of the world, diarrheal diseases still are one of the primary killers of young children. They also sabotage general health and even overall development over time. Malaria is another thing. With warming temperatures, the spread of malaria and vector-borne diseases is getting much wider. And again, it's young kids who get walloped with this. In Africa, 65% of all malaria deaths are children under 5. And for the survivors, the long-term repercussions, again, can be quite significant. Heat stress. It hits old people, but it also hits very young children. You get above a certain temperature, and this is much worse in slums where people live very densely and where air conditioning and cool water simply aren't available to everybody. And mortality rates for young children start to go up in step with the increasing temperature. A really major concern is malnutrition. It's not only from food shortages and rising food prices, it also has to do with unsanitary conditions, which make it much more difficult for children to make effective use of the calories that they get. So for children who are already undernourished, and in many poor communities, this is over 40% of the under 5s, survival becomes a much more dicey issue in extreme conditions. Even again, when it's not so extreme, malnutrition makes children much more vulnerable to other health problems, and chronic malnutrition sabotages children's mental development over time. So a stretch of weather-related hardship that older children and adolescents and adults might bounce back from, young kids can be dealing with the impact for the rest of their lives. Actually, research on malnutrition gives us a really good chance to put some numbers to the difference without climate change and with climate change. If we were not dealing with climate change right now, we could expect the incidence of malnutrition in young children to continue to go down over coming decades. But a recent study looking at a moderate climate change scenario found that severe stunting is likely to go up from 31% to 55% of under 5-year-olds by 2050, and that's in some parts of sub-Saharan Africa. In South Asia, it's likely to go up to 61%. Now, this is huge. This is severe stunting. It's 4 or 5 times more likely to cause mortality than just garden variety malnutrition. It's also far more likely to be accompanied by intellectual stunting throughout life. So when you think of the impacts for equity in societies, it's huge. It's absolutely huge. You've got a generation moving up who are physically and mentally stunted. So although these direct health impacts for children are very troubling, an equally profound concern is the way that climate change can deepen the potential for poverty. It can undermine families' capacity to get ahead, to educate their children, to improve their homes, to consolidate their livelihoods. When people are already struggling every day, every minor flood, every sort of extended dry spell, every day that's spent struggling to get your home ready to cope with the next thing that comes along, is a day that is spent eroding the gains that you could be making otherwise. And in the context of these kinds of deteriorating conditions, what was a challenge before can become overwhelming very quickly. Now, a critically important factor here is the dependency ratio, which takes us right back to children again. Here in New York, I think probably children under 5 make up about 4% of the population. In many of the communities that I'm talking about, they can make up over 20% of the population. So the imbalance there in the people who need to be taken care of and the people available to take care of them, it's a very different situation. So in many of these communities, it adds a considerable burden to families and communities, especially if these children are in poor health and if routine survival things are taking much more time than they used to. So when families and communities are under enormous stress, whether in the context of a disaster or just everyday increasing hardship, networks of support can start to be eroded. Depression and anxiety become really serious concerns. This is especially for women in poverty worldwide. So together with diminishing resources, this can be a really serious concern. You can't underestimate the sheer drudgery that's involved in taking care of children in difficult conditions. When women are trying to manage water supplies and prepare food and deal with waste and excreta and keep kids safe and clean, the burdens are enormous. And some element of neglect is inevitable, if you want to call it neglect. But when things get worse, young children become increasingly likely to face neglect and even abuse. I mean, sometimes this is a function of a very simple calculus, a volume of work. I think it's what we put out some years ago, had a very interesting article on the allocation of calories in very poor households. And what these researchers found was that when there are more calories available than the household actually needs for survival, the excess goes to the small kids. When there aren't enough calories to go around, those kids are the ones that get cut because they're not depending on them to bring in income. So it's children who are sort of the safety valve in a sense. I mean, this is true for older children too. They become an asset that families have to draw on to maintain stability, so that children who used to go to school may have to be pulled out to earn instead, to kind of right the balance a little as things go downhill. So it's not just the youngest children that suffer when stability is challenged. In many cases, kids can display incredible resilience in the face of these kinds of pressures, but we can't underestimate the challenge. There are enormous emotional strains. This becomes particularly bad in the context of disaster, displacement, emergency camps. It's been well documented what a high level of dysfunction there can be in these places. A real erosion of social norms, high levels, for instance, of sexual harassment that can be particularly targeted at young girls. So levels of anxiety, stress, helplessness in adults undermine their capacity to play a sort of protective role in these situations. So anyway, this is a pretty grim picture I'm painting. There is progress. The ast IPCC report that came out this year pays a lot more attention to the implications for children. But generally, in adaptation plans worldwide, there is not a lot of attention being paid to the fact that children's well-being is just so tightly linked to the stability of families. There's this profound reciprocal relationship. And it's just not a topic for concern in large national adaptation plans. And I'm going to stop there. I hope as the evening goes on that we'll have a chance to think about the links between this stuff and the amazing work that all of you young activists are doing. So thank you very much.
Hello. Thank you, everyone, for coming. My name is Samantha Coco Klein. I'm Senior Advisor here with Equity for Children. and I'm going to be introducing our panelists for the evening. Our first speakers are Jefferson Diaz and Zakeeyah Harris, who are both youth leaders from the Ironbound Community Corporation in Newark, New Jersey. Jefferson Diaz is 13 years old and has been an environmental justice leader for the past 2 years. This summer, he was part of an urban farming training program, Building an Urban Farm in Newark. Jefferson believes all young people should become environmental justice leaders too, to fight climate change. And also with Jefferson is Zakeeyah, who is 18 years old and Zakeeyah graduated from Eastside High School this year. Zakeeyah started her climate activism with the People's Climate March in September 2014. Zakeeyah actively takes part in movements for climate justice, environmental justice, and Black Lives Matter, because they address issues that consistently affect Black and brown people the most. I'll hand over to Jefferson and Zakeeyah now.
So, my name is Jefferson Diaz, and I am an EJL. EJL stands for Environmental Justice Leaders, and we fight for what is right: clean air, clean water, healthy food, and stopping racism. On Saturdays, we go to our community garden and we do farm chores, like watering and harvesting our crops, feeding the chickens and cleaning their coop, and collecting compost for 4 different stores in our neighborhood. These businesses give us their scraps. We bring it back to our garden. We weigh it, log it, and we dump it into our compost. Then we mix it to make soil. Compost fights pollution because we don't have to burn our garbage. Some ways I personally help climate change is by protesting the garbage incinerators, power plants, and factories. I also went to the People's Climate March last September and marched on the very front line of the march because my neighborhood is on the front lines of all the pollution and climate change. Instead of power plants that burn fossil fuels, I want hoop houses full of plants because stuff like urban farms and all the trees we plant fight climate change and clean our air. The only kind of power plants we want are ones that use solar and wind energy. And as a youth, I experienced climate change more than others. As a youth, we had to come together and shut it down.
My name is Zakeeyah Harris, and I'm from the Ironbound section in Newark, New Jersey. In the Ironbound section, there are countless problems and issues that we must address immediately. While being involved in the Ironbound Community Corporation and being an environmental justice leader, I discovered that there are many health hazards located near our homes and schools. Specifically, we have the Passaic Valley Sewage Treatment Center, which takes sewage waste from Bergen, Essex, Hudson, Passaic, and Union counties, a total of 1.4 million people. Also, we have the incinerator, which burns trash from New York City, 22 towns in Essex County, 11 other surrounding trash transfer stations, yet both are located in the Ironbound section next to our projects and schools where primarily Black and brown people live. Lastly, we have multiple toxic Superfund sites, one of which is where the chemical Agent Orange was produced. The ground received a permanent impermeable cap, meaning it is never going to be able to be used under no circumstances. The other site is the Passaic River, where more than 4 billion cubic yards of toxic sediments are sitting containing dixon, which is the byproduct of Agent Orange. There is a cleanup that will cost polluters $1.7 billion due from riverbank to riverbank. Those are all located in close proximity of where our Black and brown people live. Those companies purposely put them there because they knew that people living near wouldn't care. They wouldn't even be aware. This is no coincidence that the companies knew people wouldn't make a fuss, especially if they aren't aware of the harmful effects it has on their lives. There is no excuse for this behavior and negligence by the companies, and they're the only ones to blame. They don't care about us. They are living luxury with their clean air and healthy water. Environmental justice and climate justice are racial issues. This is a prime example. They wouldn't put an incinerator next to a wealthy school or behind an expensive home. If we do not dismantle racism, there can never be no environmental justice. Now it's time we come together as a unit for a solution. As a part of EJL, our team has already started to change our city. We've protested to terminate our incinerator, planted multiple gardens, informed our neighbors on what's around us and how to get involved, built a hoop house for fresh fruit all year round. So my hope is that one day we as a society can stand up and attack these companies who would care less about what they're doing. We need to make a change to protect our earth and our future generations.
All right. Our next speaker is Amanda Cronin. Amanda is a young climate activist, a member of the iMatter Youth Council. In her hometown of Chappaqua, New York, she's piloting the iMatter Now campaign for cities to immediately develop and implement a plan to be free of fossil fuels by 2040. She is a junior at Horace Greeley High School, media director at the Pleasantville Farmers Market, and a member of the online community, Our Digital Daughters. Please come up, Amanda.
Hi, my name is Amanda Cronin, and I'm an iMatter Youth Council leader. I'm 16 years old, and today we'll be talking about how kids like me are going to lead the movement against climate change. So how did I become a part of this movement? Well, I found my inspiration for action through my love of food. When I was 10 years old, I read The Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan, and I learned that we're living in a country with an oil-based agricultural system. After that, I joined my local farmers market, and I was the spokesperson, a spokeskid. I started interviewing the farmers and vendors, and my goal was to spread the message about the benefits of eating local. Since then, I still work at the farmers market, and I now have my own food blog called Gourmanda. And I also just recently became a vegetarian. And, and I'm really, really passionate about reducing our carbon footprint through diet. This is a picture of a stack of cricket pancakes that I made myself for my birthday. Yes, you heard me right. I made pancakes using cricket flour, ground up crickets, and they were delicious. The reason why I chose to cook up some six-legged friends is because I learned that crickets are a great source of protein, and more importantly, they have a smaller carbon footprint than livestock, literally and figuratively. I joined iMatter around the People's Climate March last year, and since then, we've started a pilot campaign for iMatter Now in my hometown of Chappaqua, and we're working hard to hold our local city leaders accountable. And now I will hand it over to our founder, Alex Lors, to talk more about iMatter.
We, as young people, we have this amazing opportunity to actually be the ones to stand up and demand change. We care about our planet. We want our voices to be heard. The vision for iMatter grew out of another organization, Kids vs. Global Warming, which I started when I was 13 after seeing Al Gore's film, An Inconvenient Truth, and realizing that our addiction to fossil fuels is actually setting the Earth's climate out of balance. My generation, we're going to be stuck dealing with the worst effects of this crisis.
I feel that we as a generation are being called to stop global warming within our lifetimes.
iMatter, it's an organization of youth and adults that are all passionate about the same issue of climate change, that all recognize the power that the youth voice has to inspire other people about the issue and inspire them to get involved too.
We planned this event called the iMatter March, and we had over 200 marches in 45 countries. Young people stood up and marched in their streets to let people know that we care about climate change.
We only have one Earth, a very beautiful Earth, and it is up to us to take care of it.
When I found iMatter, youth were driving it, youth were building the websites, youth were taking the action, youth were writing the legislation, and to me that seemed like something I really wanted to be a part of.
The youth of iMatter, they are the future. They become the face of climate change, and they can compel action just with their presence. iMatter transcends the normal politics of this conversation because you can tell the story of climate change in a way that no other organization can.
The first 6 years that I was in Congress, I said that climate change was hooey, Al Gore's imagination. I ran again in 2004, and my son, our oldest of 5, just turned 18. He said to me, "Dad, I'll vote for you, but you're going to clean up your act on the environment." This is why kids are so powerful, because they have the ability to get to our hearts and tell us that this matters.
I want a child centuries from now to be able to ask, what's climate change to their parents, and I want their parents to be able to say, oh, that's an issue from a while ago, but there were youth that wanted to make a difference and saw that they needed to change their way of life, and thanks to them, this planet is still here today.
All right, so to bring it to the present, today I'm excited to announce the launch of our brand new campaign called iMatter Now, and it's across the U.S. and cities across the U.S. We intend to wake up the places that we live and force adults and our leaders to look us, their kids, in the eyes and realize that our future is at stake. The climate crisis isn't just some political issue that everyone can talk about or ignore. It's our future, and our voices need to be heard. So the goals of the campaign are to awaken the places that we live, our cities, to the realization that this is having an impact now and on us, and also to hold our adults and city leaders accountable to create a climate plan that gets cities to zero emissions by 2040 or earlier. And here's how we're going to do it. We're forming youth leadership teams in each of these pilot cities, and these city teams will work to form school-based teams. And the specifics of the campaign will include, 1, sharing opinions. Our opinions aren't taken seriously by leaders, that's the bottom line. They think that only voters matter. Well, they're wrong. Our opinions matter more because we will be most affected by their decisions. Next, declare our intentions. We need to get serious about solving the climate crisis before it's too late. That is our declaration. Next, measure progress. We need to measure our impact and make sure that we are holding our officials accountable. Pressure with numbers. This campaign needs kid power behind it to make an impact. And so we need to grow so that people realize that it's not just a few radical kids, it's their own kids who are concerned. And finally, lead like it matters. Anyone who feels called to do something about this crisis now has the tools and support through iMatter to start a campaign in their own city. And now I will go into more details about each of these steps. To collect youth opinions, we created a survey that allows people to rate how concerned they are about the climate crisis. And we can share these concerns at city council meetings and online on social media. Any and every youth who joins this movement can now sign the Declaration of Independence from Fossil Fuels for a particular city to build local support for the campaign. And right now, live on our website, this is what the declaration looks like. The climate report card was developed with the guidance of top energy analysts and advisors and based on some of the best science research out there by Dr. Jim Hansen. These report cards will show the gap between what is truly needed to be done and what is already being done about this crisis. The report card for my own town, Chappaqua, is still in the works, but this is similar to what it would look like. It's very similar to a school report card in which every section is graded. And so, as you can see here, this city didn't do very well. But the specific sections are the zero emissions plan, renewable energy, waste, carbon removal, and of course, youth involvement. To structure our campaign, every iMatter youth team will follow quests. And these quests include things like media, report cards, speeches, and even rallies. And our campaign software is accessible via your mobile phones, so action can be taken from anywhere just with the touch of a button. And finally, our city campaigns will be led by youth like me, members of the leadership body, the iMatter Youth Council. Currently, we have 11 pilots going on in 11 cities across the country, including Des Moines, Iowa, Raleigh, North Carolina, and Portland, Oregon. And finally, I will close with this video that sums up our call to action.
It's our future that's at stake. And if we passionately call upon our towns and communities to declare our independence from fossil fuels, then our leaders will listen to us.
Whether we feel called to organize events,
write articles,
give speeches,
or just join the masses at marches and rallies,
we all have a role to play in this movement.
Our voices matter, and we are called as a generation to change our own lifestyles
influence our friends and communities,
demand that our cities transition away from fossil fuels immediately,
and hold our leaders accountable to their responsibility to create a healthy and sustainable world.
If we band together, we can end the climate crisis within our lifetimes.
join us now.
Declare your independence from fossil fuels.
All right, thank you, Amanda. Our next speaker is Alex Loznak. He's one of 21 young people from across the United States who recently filed suit with our Children's Trust against the federal government of the United States to demand a robust national climate policy. Alex is a first-year student at Columbia University, and his family lives on a farm in Oregon that his great-great-great-great-grandmother founded in 1868 after crossing the Oregon Trail. Please welcome Alex.
All right, so as Samantha said, my name's Alex Loznak, and I'm one of 21 young people from all over the country who in August filed a lawsuit against the federal government of the United States, President Obama, and a number of federal agencies to demand a robust national climate change policy. I should mention that another one of our youth plaintiffs is in the room, Victoria Barlett. In fact, please stand up, please stand up. Let's see. So here's some of our plaintiffs are in the picture here, and as I said, they're from all over the country, all walks of life, and it's a spectacular group of young people who are really changing the world. So here's me. When I heard this was going to be about cities, youth, and climate change, I thought, oh shucks, I hope I'm the right person for this. I live on my family's farm. It's been in the family for about 150 years. It's about 10 miles from the nearest store, so about as different from being here in Manhattan as you could be. I'm actually and I'm a student up the street at Columbia University, so that's why I'm here in New York and everything. And here's just another photo of the ranch. It's an absolutely beautiful place to live, and I grew up really close to nature. And grew up to value the environment and taking action to protect our natural resources. And I really became aware of sort of the political world in 2008 when Senator Obama was running for president. My grandmother took me knocking on doors for Obama, and I remember the night that when it became apparent that he was going to win the Democratic nomination, and he said that this would be looked back upon as the moment when the rise of the oceans began to slow. And I remember just the chills that I felt when I heard that. And I'm gonna return to Obama in a moment, but just let me say that I think that through this lawsuit and through the advocacy of youth involved with our Children's Trust and all these organizations here, that we really can slow down the rise of the oceans, and this is how we do it. Climate change really became real in my mind when my father, who's a professional nature photographer, in fact, he took the landscape I showed you a moment ago, when he went down to the Gulf of Mexico during the BP oil spill. And I remember getting calls every day from him, like today I went and saw like the pelicans here that were oiled, or there were little sea turtles and everything. And it was just, it really brought home for me the importance of dealing with these issues. My home community is actually a frontline community in the battle against fossil fuel extraction. A Canadian company called Jefferson wants to build a 1 billion cubic foot per day natural gas pipeline called the Pacific Connector, and I have it labeled Keystone West here because I really believe, like the Keystone Pipeline, that we're gonna defeat this project as well. So here's just some facts about Pacific Connector. It would run 232 miles. I didn't put this in the slide. I think it's something like 700 landowners. They're proposing to take away their land to build this project. Just the power plant that would it would carry this natural gas to this port city pretty close to where I live, liquefy it, turn it into a liquid, and then ship it overseas to be burned. And just the power plant that would power that process would be the biggest carbon emitter in the state of Oregon. And when you take into account the emissions from, ultimately burning the gas and the emissions upstream from the extraction, it's like adding millions and millions of new cars to the road. It's comparable to the emissions from the entire state of Oregon. So, and despite what our federal officials have said, that they want to deal with climate change, they want to solve this problem. They've rubber stamped just about every single permit for this, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and the U.S. Department of Energy. And that is one of the specific actions of the federal government that we are challenging in this lawsuit. So here's me along the pipeline route. They've already gone up and started spray painting the trees. You'll see these, here's this 500-year-old tree, and this is number 334 to be cut. Even though the thing hasn't actually gotten all the local approvals and stuff that it needs, that's how confident they are that they're going to be able to build this project. I should also mention that area that is in the picture, there have been wildfires in that area since we took the picture, and in the environmental impact statements, they haven't really addressed the issue of wildfires over this explosive natural gas pipeline, which really brings home the point that these agencies are serving the corporate interest rather than the public interest, which is what they're supposed to be doing. Another plaintiff in the lawsuit, Jacob LaBelle here, he's a superhero in my mind. He went to Washington, D.C. When the Pope was in town and fasted for a number of days in front of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission office to demand no new permits for fossil fuel infrastructure. So it was through my advocacy against the Pacific Connector pipeline and those local issues that I really got involved with our Children's Trust and the lawsuit. And I just want to talk about the lawsuit, of course. So it was filed by a group called Our Children's Trust, which is a public interest law group based out of Eugene, Oregon. There are 21 youth plaintiffs from all across the country. We are challenging all of the actions of the federal government that allow and promote unsafe levels of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States. And we're specifically challenging that Pacific Connector pipeline in Oregon. And we are demanding a national plan to reduce carbon dioxide in the atmosphere to 350 parts per million, which is the safe level according to Jim Hansen and many other scientists. Jim Hansen's a professor up where I go to school at Columbia University. So the argument, and I'm not an attorney, so I won't get too deep into the legal details, but the federal government has known, there's documents from the Lyndon Johnson administration, 1965, saying that they knew that climate change was going to be a huge problem and that they needed to deal with it. And then in 1990, getting to be 25 years ago, they put together a plan that would have stabilized carbon dioxide in our atmosphere at 350 parts per million, but the plan was never implemented because of politics. And we're basically saying that by allowing and promoting these activities that cause unsafe levels of emissions, that they are violating young people's basic fundamental inherent rights to life, liberty, and property. So momentum. So I say to people that I'm suing the government, and people think that the young people we just drafted our own lawsuit or something. And we actually have a really strong team of attorneys and scientists working on this. The attorneys in Oregon are working around the clock to make this happen. And there's precedent around the world and here in the United States for citizens taking their governments to court to demand action on climate change. Just today, I actually was speaking with Roger Cox, who's an attorney from the Netherlands, where there was a lawsuit very similar to this one, where the court ordered the government of the Netherlands to reduce carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, or carbon dioxide emissions, I should say, 25% by the year 2020, which is quite significant. There was a similar decision in Afghanistan. Here in New Mexico, we had a victory, which, without getting too technical, basically there was language in the court's decision saying that the atmosphere is a public resource in the same way that public waterways and other things like that, which is a critical part of our argument. In Washington State, a judge ordered Governor Inslee to consider the 350 parts per million target for carbon dioxide, and as a result of that, the governor of Washington came out and ordered state agencies to reduce carbon emissions, I should say, 50% by the year 2050, which is not enough, but it's quite significant and substantial that as a result of this litigation, we're getting those cuts. We're right now awaiting further decisions in Washington State, and in North Carolina. Hallie Turner was one of the iMatter youth featured in the video we just saw, and she's actually taking the state of North Carolina to court to demand reductions in carbon emissions. And it's a global campaign. There's similar lawsuits have been filed in Belgium, Norway, India, Australia, and just all over the place. Here's a picture in the Netherlands after they won. And I think this picture is going to be, you're going to see it in the history books because that victory was an absolute breakthrough. So just recently, trade groups representing all of the major fossil fuel companies, Koch Industries, BP, Shell, ExxonMobil, they officially filed a motion to try and intervene in our case. So the translation for that is they're scared of us, which is good. You know, they've had a really bad couple of weeks with the Keystone Pipeline rejected. The state of New York is now investigating Exxon for its denial of climate change. And just in my home state of Oregon, Portland, Oregon passed a historic resolution against new fossil fuel infrastructure. So they see which way the wind's blowing, and they don't like it. And I'd also like to mention that we heard earlier about how the poorest people in the world and the people who've done the least to cause the problem are going to be the most impacted. These are the richest people in the world. There's something fundamentally wrong about the fact that the richest industry and the industry that is ultimately responsible for this problem, that they're trying to block solutions, and yet that's what we're seeing. They want their corporate lawyers. They've hired Sidley Austin, which is, I guess, like the best corporate law firm in the country, to represent them, and they want these attorneys from Sidley to stand shoulder to shoulder with the federal government's attorneys. And so far, the administration has really been on the side of industry. They're arguing against us. They're standing shoulder to shoulder with big oil. So what's really needed, we need our president we need him to work with us, not against us. We also need judges who are going to be willing to stick their necks out, stand on the right side of history, and do the right thing by ruling in our favor and ordering the government to finally deal with climate change at a scale that is commensurate with the size of the problem. So I wanted to include something, how you can help. Like us on Facebook, absolutely. Go to ourchildrenstrust.org. You can sign our letter of support. And then the third one, the big one, is really this campaign is being driven by young people who are willing to, really step out there, take the leap, and take their governments to court. So, New York is an international city. I've learned that since I've been here from Oregon. There are probably people in this room from many countries, from many states, and absolutely, if this is something that you would like to do, please talk to me about this, or go to our website at ourchildrenstrust.org. And I just thank you so much for letting me be here, and yeah, thank you so much.
Our last speaker is Anze Zadel, who is the co-founder of the Amenawan Solar School Initiative, which is a 2014 New Challenge project, which is a competition run by the New School University. Anze is a socially engaged architect and urbanist, currently a PhD candidate in the Public and Urban Policy program at the Milano School. He is also a teaching fellow at Parsons Strategic Design and Management Program. Anze, please come on up.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the invitation and giving me the opportunity to present, and thank you to all of you to come here to the conference. Before I start, I would like to share with you two kind of mock-ups of the pamphlets that represent the work that we are doing in Lagos, Nigeria. Unfortunately, all the originals stayed in Lagos, so these are what I've been able to print today. The Amenawan Solar School Initiative is building a sustainable compound. I think I need to download this. Sorry. The Amenon Solar School Initiative is building a sustainable compound and school in Lagos, in the neighborhood of Ikeja, in Nigeria. Our initiative started working in May 2013 on a vision how to retrofit a compound owned by late Miss Esther Amenawan, and how to honor her memory. The compound consists of a primary school. This is Miss Esther Amenawan. Of the primary school, of a business, a commercial space, and of private residences. Envisioned as a model for living and sharing sustainable and equitable practices, the Amenawan Solar School is practicing with the primary school that is part of the compound while developing a curriculum for sustainable living, and also with neighbors and other community members through a series of workshops. We are instituting we are instituting a hybrid model that will harvest rainwater, solar energy, and encourage local food production. Inspired by permaculture practices, we are building sustainable technologies together with the community. Lagos is the third largest city in the world and is growing by about 500,000 people per year. Everyday life in Lagos is characterized by lack of affordable potable water, by the lack of a municipal waste treatment system, open sewers, daily electricity outages, and lack of open space which would give the possibility to cultivate food. Excuse me. Lagos is situated on a lagoon, and having been built on wetlands, it is subject to floodings during every rain season. In addition to climate change, residents of Lagos are suffering the effects of reclamation projects which are filling the wetlands in Lagos by the sand dug from the sea. The key method that we are using to develop the Amenawan Solar School is workshopping. We speak to people about the conditions in the neighborhood, about people's desires and needs, and together we decide what workshop we would like to do on. When affordable potable water came up to be the main issue, we decided to do our first workshop on rainwater catchment system, which would provide affordable water for local residents. This was our inaugural workshop for our school, and also modeled the kind of open source knowledge that we are sharing and that we approach through our work. Rainwater harvesting workshop took place in January 2015. The workshop had several components. First, we learned about the conditions of water in Lagos, about potable water, about traditional practices that existed in Nigeria on how to collect rainwater, about the sanitary maintenance, and about filtering and storing rainwater. With an eventual rooftop system in mind, we developed our prototype, which would cater the needs of the school, children, and the people that live on the compound. We invited several local organizations, ranging from landowners to shack dwellers that dwell on the shores of the lagoon. The workshopping method means that we must adapt and recognize that we are not only teachers, but also students. While eventually, this is the image of our eventual prototype, eventually we imagine that we'll be able to use existing check on the premises and to retrofit it in our rainwater collection system. We ended up building completely new structure with new materials. To build the right network and know how to upcycle materials, which we eventually wanted, we figured out that we need to spend more time and build trust, another kind of trust in the field. Harvesting rainwater is easy, but our challenge is how to how to prevent from being contaminated. This requires consciousness regarding how to build and how to maintain such a system. For the workshop, we produced a manual. These are some images from our first workshop. Here is one of our team members, Charlie Werin. He's demonstrating how the filtration system works. And these are some of the youth going through the pamphlet that I just shared with you. So for our workshop, we produced a manual for building and maintaining a do-it-yourself water collection and filtration system. We developed exercises which are featured here on this image and the quiz, which will help us test the knowledge that participants learn through our workshops. This will be helpful for the adults as well as for developing our curriculum for the school. This is another exercise. This is the map of Lagos, and we are asking participants to map neighborhoods which get flooded. And this is image. So this is the prototype that we eventually had to develop new prototype. And on the left is image of our filtration system, for which we eventually want to use upcycled materials. For example, buckets that are used in food industry. We are still testing the water system over time, but in the future, we want to workshop with community members to build a system appropriate to their needs and specifications. For example, to the shack dwellers in Makoko. This is the neighborhood Makoko. And another neighborhood, Morocco, members of that community came to our workshop. Or we will move forward and start working on other issues such as solar energy, production of local food together in collaboration with Permaculture Garden in Badagry, which is in Lagos State, and other issues. I just want to share, these are some images when the prototype was built. This is Charlie in a workshop with school children from our school. This is the final outcut, the prototype. And Johnny that is taking photo. This is in the classroom, children that are going through the pamphlet that I shared with you, and they're doing exercises on issues of potable water, which diseases and which contaminate, what are the contaminants of water. Thank you so much.
We're going to move now to the panel discussion. I'm going to start by introducing two questions to the panel, and then we will open up to the floor. And I apologize to everybody for running late, but I assume you all agree with me that these are fascinating speakers and experiences, and we wouldn't want to cut them short. So my first question to the panel is that within the frame of intergenerational justice and equity, today's young people are seen as the natural champions of the climate change movement, because you are the ones who are going to be living with the impacts of our inaction today. However, at the same time, children and adolescents do not have the right to vote, often have limited access to decision makers and places of power, and scarce financial resources. Given this contradicting vision of children as the natural champions and the realities of limited power and resources, what do you see as children and adolescents' specific contributions to action on climate change? In your experience, what special voice or strengths do young people bring?
Well, I'll start off. Is this working? Yeah, okay. It's on. So as you saw in the first video that I shared about the story of iMatter, Congressman or former Congressman Bob Inglis didn't make the decision to change his views on climate change until his own son spoke up and said something. So I think the specific contribution of youth is that we're not expected to be heard, we're expected to be seen, not heard. And so when we speak up, it's all the more powerful, whatever we say, and we have the moral authority to make a change because we are going to be affected by it the most because we will be living with the burden and the effects.
If I could just add, in the context of our Children's Trust lawsuit against the federal government, what we are arguing is that the government is violating the Constitution of the United States by allowing these activities that promote and allow unsafe levels of carbon dioxide emissions. Now, the reason that we have a constitution, that we're a constitutional democracy instead of an absolute democracy, is so that there can be protections for the minority, and people, so that in a pure democracy, the legislature can just completely run roughshod over people's rights. And one of the things that we are asserting in the lawsuit is that young people, because we are disproportionately impacted by climate change, that really the federal government is actually violating our constitutional rights, and that we should be considered a protected class in this context. So I should also emphasize that while the litigation is obviously being facilitated by our team of lawyers and by the scientists that are working on this, it is absolutely being driven by young people. Young people have to initially ask that we put together these lawsuits. A gentleman named Chappaqua Martinez, who is 15 years old, and he's a fairly famous youth climate change activist. He originally asked that this lawsuit be prepared against the federal government. So, while I think that it's important to have qualified adults, facilitating, youth can absolutely be, the fuel in the engine making it happen.
Oh, I'll go. I think that to see a specific change, you have to want the change and then be the change. You have to demand change from the local leaders. In my community, we've turned a regular parking lot that was concrete, into a urban farming center where there's hoop houses, there's murals created by people in the community. It's free for the community. It's grown and processed by the youth in the community. So I think that's.
So in the Manawan Solar School Initiative, we are addressing issues, of course, that existed before climate change. Access to potable water, to sanitation conditions. But of course, these conditions got worse and are going to get worse with climate change. We are working in a way that we want people to be aware of the environment that they live in. We are not directly working on addressing the government, but through educating people and sharing this knowledge in the community. However, there is an organization, Center for Economic and Social Rights, that participated in our workshop, and they actually managed to stop the demolition of the Makoko neighborhood, which houses 500,000 population. It's a shantytown, and they actually managed to convince the mayor of Lagos to propose an alternative development plan for luxury development that was proposed for the neighborhood.
All right, thank you. So last question for me before we turn to the floor. Cities are being increasingly identified as the place where most carbon emissions are generated and as sites of vulnerability in a changing climate. So what specific contributions can young people in urban areas make to climate change adaptation and mitigation? And what steps and actions would you recommend? We have Jefferson, you look, no. Can you repeat it? Okay, so cities, what specific contributions can young people in urban areas make to climate change adaptation and mitigation? What steps and actions would you recommend?
So I recommend that the young people could become an environmental justice leader like me, so they could do marches and shut down all the power plants. And
Thanks. Any other? Amanda?
Yeah, at iMatter, we are focusing on all towns in America, but specifically urban areas, to make changes in their legislation and to create a discussion, an open discussion between the citizens of that city and the lawmakers to make changes in that place. And so I think that would be the specific contribution of youth in urban areas and what can be done. Specifically with iMatter, our climate report card, creating and doing this research on the report card and then presenting the report card to the leaders saying, this is what is being done right now, it's not good enough, and this is what needs to be done to get there.
Alex?
Yeah, I'd like to just point out my co-plaintiff Victoria, who's here, and I know that one of the things she's working on is trying to get the New York City Council to require climate change education in schools in New York City, and that's incredibly important. I'd also like to highlight some of the work that our Children's Trust has done back in Oregon, and this is not something that I was directly involved in because I'm out on the farm, but in the city of Eugene, Oregon. Our Children's Trust, with local youth, they went to the city council and actually got the city council to adopt the first science-based climate change recovery ordinance in the United States. So what that means is, there's a lot of cities that have set like aspirational goals for what they're going to do as far as reducing emissions or using renewable energy. But this was, I think, the first actually legally binding plan where they have to reduce the emissions, and they're actually figuring out, they're budgeting how much carbon dioxide can they actually emit while staying on a path that's consistent with the 350 parts per million target. So obviously action at the federal level is really slow. That's why we're suing them. But I think definitely at like the municipal level, there's a lot of opportunities to move forward quickly.
All right. At this point, I'd like to hand over to the audience and see if anybody has questions for the panelists. So just lift your hand in the air if you have a question. Okay.
What do you think about the pollution?
The floor is yours, guys.
Yes.
Go ahead, Jeff.
So what I think about the pollution is that it's bad because they're in factories that all the little kids are having asthma because of the pollution. So that's why we get compost, so we don't have to burn our garbage and make pollution.
Okay, Jeff.
Only one question, because you said, look, we are not radical kids. So why you don't tell us how adult people look at you when you are claiming and saying we want to change the things? They take you seriously? They say they are radical? What?
So the question is how adults should look at kids who are trying to make a change instead of just like pushing us off and calling us off, oh, they're just radical. Well, if we get enough people on board and if we call to action all of our sisters, our brothers, our friends, the community, because this is a community-oriented national movement and campaign, eventually our goal is for leaders and for parents and all adults in power to see that it's their kids and their friends' kids and their neighbors' kids that are doing these things. It's not some radical kid that they heard about on the news. It's in their homes. Their kids are feeling this threat and that they want to do something about it.
Can I just weigh in on that question as well? I mean, obviously, adults have had like really mixed reactions to what we're doing as far as suing the government. Like my family has been extremely supportive of me getting involved with this. Obviously, the fossil fuel industry is not hugely supportive, but it's mixed. But yeah, we need more. We need people to get behind us and support the work that we're doing. Definitely.
This is to Zakeeyah and Jefferson, and then adding on to that to Alex. You live in perhaps the most diverse, celebrated, creative neighborhood in Newark, and I'm wondering how you get other people in your community involved in your work. And you mentioned the particular problem of the waste incinerator, which was a gift of the Port Authority. And I'm wondering, this one goes to Alex. Might your friends expand their suit to the states of New York and New Jersey and the Port Authority for impacting the city of Newark with so many negative things, and leaving it without a tax base at the same time? All of those are tax exempt. So first, how do you engage, if at all, your neighbors in the Ironbound, and can you go and embrace Newark next?
Well, through the ICC, they do a lot of different programs. Like they just did a program to get people involved from outside where they are, in different wards, to be more engaged and become an environmental justice leader. That included senior citizens, it included young people, it includes anybody and everybody who want to be involved. And they have two stations based, a trailer and then the actual building. So I mean, it's free for anybody to come in. You want to get involved, then you come get involved.
Right, I think as far as our Children's Trust getting involved at the level of New York, New Jersey, and everything, there are actually legal actions underway in all 50 states in the United States. It's more concentrated on the national, the global issue of climate change than these local environmental issues. But I think by working towards solutions to climate change, we can definitely deal with issues like local pollution. And you mentioned a tax base as well. Putting people to work, generating revenues, generating jobs, building the clean energy future. That's what I see as the result, ultimately, of our lawsuit and our lawsuits around the country. But yeah.
For Alex, do you think public opinion towards the lawsuit, such as press coverage and social media, play a big part in the results?
Yeah, I do, and I think what really matters is our values as a society. Like the recent case on marriage equality would not have been possible if it weren't for the gay rights movement, and if it weren't for people really standing up and saying that everyone should have the right to marry whoever they love. In the same vein, people need to stand up and say climate change is a moral issue. As I was like I was saying earlier, the richest corporations are responsible for the problem, and we heard earlier that the poorest people in the world are the most impacted. So to answer your question, absolutely yes, and people need to publicly state that they support us, post about it on Facebook, because that stuff really matters, and that's what's going to ultimately allow us to change the world here.
Hi, Alex mentioned plans for a new pipeline in Oregon. And also the Keystone pipeline was recently blocked. So my question is that pipelines are negative, they can leak, but they're also replacing trains which transport oil and natural gas, and the statistics of leaks from pipelines compared to trains, and also the carbon footprint of pipelines is much smaller than that of trains. So why would you oppose pipelines?
So I think one of the issues is that when you're building new fossil fuel infrastructure like a pipeline, and especially with like the Jordan Cove, the natural gas pipeline, It's billions and billions of dollars of investment. So they're expecting to have that infrastructure operating for decades. And what it does is it locks us in to our dependence on fossil fuels. Whereas you can look at like the issue of trains and stuff, they're more temporary. Whereas this building new physical infrastructure takes us down completely the wrong road. It also makes it more economical for them to extract the fuel, and that leads ultimately to more fuel being burned. Does that answer? Yeah. Thank you.
I'm interested in about advocacy and with how you experience adult roles in your different organizations, and adults can be very bossy, and I'm curious as to whether you've encountered that and what advice you have for adults who want to be helpful but who may tend to sort of want to take over.
Well, specifically for iMatter, we have our executive director here today, Larry Kraft, and he's not bossy. but in answer to your question, iMatter is run an holacracy, where everyone gets a role and everyone is treated equally on their own teams and roles. And so we really, really want to try to make this an organization run by kids for kids. That doesn't mean that adults cannot help out, and they're a great help because they need to help us bring continuity to the organization, because we're still kids who need to go to school every day and catch the bus, and during the day, having adults to help out and do work, more technical work, is definitely helpful. So getting involved, mentorships, helping kids learn more about the problems and the effects of climate change are so important. Things like that.
Thank you. I think we have the last two comments that we'll take. I see a hand there, and then, yes, I see the two hands. So we'll try to.
Hi, along the same lines, you also get older and stop being children. And I'm wondering about the sustainability of these incredible organizations. Do you constantly hand over to younger people, or does the organization move with you and become a young adults organization? I mean, what's the way of sustaining these kinds of initiatives?
Well, at the ICC, it's adults, but the majority of the people are children under 15. So even as they get older, it's always more children coming in who are way younger. Children as 5 and 6 and, stuff like that. Once they get older, more come in. So it's never like the program never moves on. As you get older, you get more advanced into what's going on, and then you can come back and you can teach the younger ones. So when they get older, the process just keeps going on and on.
But you can stay in the organization at this point as someone who's graduated from high school. You'll continue to be involved in it as you get older?
Yes, it never stops. I'll keep going when I'm 50,
I think I just like to say that as the problem gets more and more serious of climate change, more and more young people are waking up and realize that they've got to advocate for their future. One of the girls in the video about iMatter, Hallie Turner, who I mentioned is taking North Carolina to court with our Children's Trust, she's really an inspiration to me. And I got to say, she's much further along than I was when I was in 8th grade on this. So I think, but I do think it's definitely important for youth who are growing up and getting out of that youth role to stay involved. Like for me, for example, I'm interested in like going to law school or something and helping continue this effort in that way. But yeah, that there's definitely no shortage of younger students.
The cohort of people that are bringing the suit right now, is your sense that they will all remain involved on some level?
I think absolutely. Yeah, I think that all of the youth who are involved with the lawsuit care very deeply and are very personally and deeply impacted by the issue of climate change, be it by the effects of droughts and heat waves, or being like me on the front lines of a fossil fuel extraction community.
And it's the same for iMatter too. And when you get older and move through the organization, it's not like there's a cutoff age. Of course, when you go to college and graduate from high school, you will be doing less work because you will be focusing on other things. But there's no requirement that you leave the campaign and the council. You could absolutely start your own little club at the college and get more people that way. That's a great way to garner support. But once you get older, you can still be part of the organization. Our own founder, Alex, started when he was 13, and now he's graduated from college, so he's still involved.
Good evening, and congratulations for the engagement in something that's so important. I work with UNICEF in communication for development, and the question I have for you is about the fact that this is an issue around equity, and given that social media is so important to social movements around these kind of issues, what is your strategy for including the persons who are affected in the most marginalized communities, because they don't have smartphones? What is your strategy for engaging and ensuring that you're not just speaking on behalf of people who are affected, but actually involving those who don't have the tools to engage?
Well, in the Ironbound section of Newark, we are those people. We're not speaking on behalf of those people. My city is one of the front line, mostly affected, has the most pollution, has the most hazardous health risks in New Jersey. So we're not speaking on behalf of those people. We are those people.
The question I really had was about the international aspect of it, because there's so many communities. So I love the fact that persons within the United States, but you may be from those communities who are not as privileged, but who still have access to smartphones and other social media tools that others don't have in other international settings. So that's the question I have. It's about how are you thinking globally, because this is a global issue. And how do you engage with those communities who do not have smartphones? And the way of communicating nowadays is through these kind of platforms. That's the question.
So let me take that question. For example, our initiative is quite low-tech. We have blog, but our main strategy is workshopping. So we organize workshops and we share our knowledge, which is open source, through workshops. So either for now we've been on our location, but we intend also to do workshops, with possibility to go to other communities and demonstrate how, for example, our rainwater harvesting prototype works. So it's really, how, and then publishing pamphlets that I shared with you. So these low-cost pamphlets that they are free of, we don't charge for them, and they are available to communities, and they can build, because it's do-it-yourself kind of technology.
Hello, my name is Amy Laveras, and I'm in my last year of high school. I come from Woodside Housing Projects in Queens, and we face a lot of situations living in these apartments. So my question is, do you think these marginalized urban communities can afford to transition to cleaner energy given the other issues they have, like education and sanitation?
Can you say that one more time?
Yes. Do you think these marginalized urban communities can afford to transition to cleaner energy given the other issues they have, like education and sanitation?
Well, I know that composting is free. It's free to do. You can stop buying from your regular food market, which isn't safe, and grow your own things through composting by going to those same food markets who sell you bad food, by getting that bad food and then turning it into soil, growing your own food. And then you can also change, you can actually go to the housing complex and, definitely ask them, can they recycle? Because I know in Newark, the Newark Housing Authority is trying to recycle. They trying to change from the dumpsters to recycling, which is, you just got to ask about it. Because when, wait, 1 second. I'm trying to think of. I think that you would definitely want to live better before, you can because when, oh my goodness, I'm really trying to say this. Can we,
So while you put your thoughts together,
Yeah.
I'm going to just jump in as well and just say that given what happened to so much of the housing here during Hurricane Sandy, what happened to the public housing, and it really showed the neglect, the lack of investment in the New York City public housing, and so I think there is a window now. People are more aware about climate change in New York, and so I think you can probably, by linking the poor conditions in these places and linking that to climate change and about the need to make the housing more resilient, you have another argument that addresses climate change, but also addresses the day-to-day, struggle to get by in low-income communities as well. So, Zakeeyah, are you ready again?
Oh, I think you said it.
Sorry. Okay, I think we really will, last question, and then we need to wrap up.
So you've addressed how you're going to educate adults on this topic, but how are you going to educate kids who aren't aware of climate change?
So maybe if just one more time the question.
You've addressed how you're going to educate adults on this topic, but how are you going to educate children who aren't aware of climate change?
Well, I'd like to just, again, point out the efforts of Victoria, who's here, in trying to require climate change education in New York City public schools.
Yeah. Victoria, why don't you stand up? Just stand up so we can see your face. There we go. So there's Victoria.
So really, I think advocacy in the area of education is going to lead to, programs like that, like climate change education in our schools, which are so critical. This is going to be the defining issue of our century, and students absolutely should be learning about it in school.
Sorry, if you guys want to support that campaign for the climate education in schools, there's actually a resolution at the City Council, 0375. So if you can give a call or email your elected official and ask them to support climate education in all schools K through 12, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about social media before. It's such a strong and powerful tool to use for the spread of movements, especially for young people who are the largest users of social media. So I think to spread the ideals and the force of the movement, really using social media, Facebook to share recent articles about accomplishments, getting your friends to share articles saying, hey, have you heard of this? This sounds really cool. Maybe we should sign the Declaration of Independence from fossil fuels and get on this campaign. Or Instagram is also great. A simple image can just convey so much. And just by reading an article, seeing that these ideas are out there is really powerful, and that could definitely help get more people to be involved.
So I want to just wrap up by thanking our panelists and our organizers. Where are you? There's Beatrice, who has done a fantastic job. You have a closer as well, so I should hand over to you at this point, and to thank Alberto Minujin as well, who's coming up.
Okay, let's be together. Thank you very much. I want only to say, and I give the word to you, thank you very much. We learned, and I want to say that we are really committed. I'm talking about Equity for Children, but I'm talking about the new school, that this is not one event, it's a process. So we will continue doing things. We are learning, and we are trying to see what we should do and what we can do. So please come back to us and say, well, we need help on this, we want to do this, and we will be with you on all this. So thank you very much to all the volunteers. We have a bunch of people from the new school working with us, and thank you for putting this together, Beatrice and Samantha.
Okay, so yeah, I want to thank also our panelists. Thank you so much for coming and participating, and Samantha, our moderator, and thank you to our volunteers. So as Alberto was saying, this event is only the beginning of an ongoing initiative that Equity for Children has just launched about climate change, children, and young people. So this event was being videotaped, so please check our website at www.equityforchildren.org in the coming weeks if you want to see the presentations again and the panel discussion, and please share with your networks. So please also take a look at the handouts. Most of you should have a folder, and in the handouts we have a case study on iMatter, which was written by Samantha Coco Klein. Also, we have a mobilization one-pager with resources for young people who are interested in getting engaged with climate change issues. So please, also, we actually published the case study on our website, and we're going to be publishing more case studies in the coming months. So please check our website and like our page on Facebook, and also follow us on Twitter. So this concludes the presentation and discussion part of the evening, but please stay and enjoy the refreshments that we have at the back of the room. And thank you so much for coming. Thank you.